Y'all ever had a parent that pushed you so hard towards success that you forgot what it even felt like to be a kid? Yeah? Well, buckle up, because today we're diving back into the Jackson family and breaking down exactly why Michael Jackson, the biggest pop star to ever walk this earth, spent his entire adult life running from the shadow of one man, his own father, Joe Jackson. Let's set the scene. Gary, Indiana. A small steel town where dreams go to either die or get beaten into existence, apparently. Joe Jackson is working a job he hates, coming home every night with nothing but frustration and a guitar he barely lets anybody touch. Catherine is holding the household together, raising a house full of kids, and already you can feel the tension simmering before Michael even shows up. Now, when Michael is born, nobody in that house has any idea they just welcomed the man who's about to change music forever. To Joe, though, he's just another mouth to feed, and more importantly, another voice to add to the group he's already grooming his sons for. And listen, I need y'all to understand something. Joe wasn't thinking, let me nurture my children's talent. Joe was thinking, let me build myself an empire, and the kids just happened to be the bricks. You want to eat? Then you sing. That's basically the energy in this house from day one. And little Michael, barely old enough to tie his own shoes, is already being drilled on pitch, rhythm, and stage presence. Most kids his age are worried about cartoons. Michael's worried about missing a cue and catching a belt for it. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Michael wasn't just talented. He was undeniable, the kind of talent that makes grown men in the room go quiet. And Joe knew it. He saw dollar signs the second Michael opened his mouth. But instead of that being a moment of pride, it became a moment of pressure. Because if Michael was the golden ticket, that meant Michael couldn't afford to mess up. Not once. Do it again. But I did it right. Do it again. That's basically every rehearsal in that house on repeat for years. And look, I get it. Discipline builds greatness, sure. But there's a difference between discipline and straight up fear. And from what we know, what Michael grew up with was fear dressed up as parenting. So the Jackson 5 starts blowing up, Motown comes calling, Berry Gordy signs them, and suddenly these kids from Gary, Indiana, are performing in front of thousands of screaming fans. Joe finally gets his empire. But here's the kicker. The more famous the boys get, the more Joe tightens his grip. You'd think success would soften him up a little, right? Nope. If anything, it made him worse, because now there was even more to lose. And this is exactly where we start to see Michael pull away emotionally, even while he's still physically standing right next to his father on stage. Because on stage, Michael is magic. Off stage, Michael is a kid who's terrified of disappointing a man who never once told him, I'm proud of you, without immediately following it up with, now do it again, better. You did good tonight. Thank you, Daddy. Don't get comfortable. Tomorrow we do better. I mean, come on, let the boy breathe for like 5 seconds. Now fast forward a bit, and Michael starts finding a father figure somewhere else, in Berry Gordy. And this is huge, because Berry actually takes the time to talk to Michael like a person, not a product. He asks him how he's feeling, what he wants, what he's scared of, things Joe never once thought to ask. And Michael, starved for that kind of attention, latches on hard. Of course, Joe notices this, and instead of asking himself why his own son is running toward another man for comfort, he just gets jealous. Because to Joe, Michael getting close to Berry means Michael slipping out of his control, and Joe cannot have that. This man built his entire identity around being the one pulling the strings, and Michael, even as a child, could feel those strings tightening every single day. By the time the Jackson 5 are certified superstars, Michael is basically a walking contradiction. On stage, he's confident, electric, untouchable. Off stage, he's quiet, guarded, and visibly uncomfortable in his own skin, and people around the family start noticing it too. Michael starts talking about how he doesn't like the way he looks, how he feels like he missed out on being a regular kid, how performing became less about joy and more about survival. I never got to be a kid. That line right there, that's the whole story in one sentence. Because while the world was watching this adorable little boy dance and sing his heart out, behind the scenes, he was clocking in like it was a job he never applied for. Now here's where things really start cracking. As the brothers get older, they start wanting independence, wanting to make their own decisions about music, about relationships, about their own lives. And Joe, true to form, is not here for that. Every time one of the boys tries to step outside the box Joe built, he shuts it down immediately. Marriages get side-eyed. Personal choices get overridden. And Michael watches all of this happen to his brothers, taking mental notes the entire time. Because Michael's not stupid. He sees exactly what's coming for him, too. He sees that no matter how big he gets, no matter how many records he sells, in Joe's eyes, he's still the meal ticket first and the son second. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you're a kid who just wants your father to be proud of you for reasons that have nothing to do with money. So when Michael eventually goes solo and becomes the biggest star on the planet, You'd think this would be the moment Joe finally lightens up, right? Wrong again. If anything, Joe leans in harder, trying to insert himself into every decision, every deal, every appearance. And Michael, now a grown man with the whole world in the palm of his hand, finally starts pushing back. I don't need you to manage me anymore. After everything I did for you, that's exactly why I can't let you keep doing it. Oh, that's cold, but honestly, earned. This is the turning point because for the first time in his life, Michael isn't performing for approval. He's setting a boundary, and boundaries were never something Joe understood, let alone respected. To Joe, family loyalty meant obedience. To Michael, by this point, loyalty meant finally protecting his own peace. And look, I want to be fair here because it's not like Joe was some cartoon villain twirling his mustache. The man came from a hard background himself, and in his mind, he was preparing his kids for a brutal industry that chews people up and spits them out. But intention doesn't erase impact. You can want the best for your kids and still traumatize them trying to get there. Both things can be true at the same time. As the years go on, Michael becomes more reclusive, more guarded, more protective of his own space. And honestly, can you blame him? The one person who was supposed to be his safe place growing up was instead the person he had to be the most careful around. That kind of wound doesn't just heal because you got famous and rich. If anything, fame just gave Michael more room to build walls around himself, walls Joe helped lay the first bricks for. Later in life, there were attempts at reconciliation, public appearances together, quiet moments where it looked like maybe, just maybe, they were finding some kind of peace. But you can't unlive a childhood. You can't erase years of being drilled, disciplined, and pressured into perfection. At best, what Michael and Joe had in those later years was a fragile truce, not a healed relationship. And that's honestly the saddest part of this whole story. Because underneath all the record sales, all the sold-out stadiums, all the history-making moonwalks, there's a little boy in Gary, Indiana, who just wanted his dad to say, "I'm proud of you," without a follow-up note attached. And by the time Joe might have actually meant it, too much had already happened for those words to fully land the way they should have. So when people ask why Michael Jackson could never fully forgive Joe Jackson, the answer isn't complicated. It's not about one bad night or one harsh rehearsal. It's about a lifetime of a father treating his son's gift like a business asset instead of a blessing, and a son who spent the rest of his life trying to figure out where the performance ended and where he actually began. Now let's talk about the Thriller era for a second, because this is where the cracks really turn into canyons. Michael is now, without a doubt, the biggest artist on the entire planet. We're talking record-breaking sales, sold-out arenas, magazine covers, the whole nine yards. And what does Joe do with all of this? Does he sit back and just enjoy watching his son thrive? Absolutely not. Joe starts showing up to interviews trying to take credit, dropping lines about how I made him every chance he gets. Without me, there is no Michael Jackson. Dad, please, not right now. And you can see it in Michael's demeanor during these years. That exhaustion of constantly having to manage his father's ego on top of managing his own career, his own health, his own sanity. It's like carrying a backpack full of bricks that never gets any lighter, no matter how high you climb. Then you've got the infamous Pepsi commercial incident, where Michael's hair catches fire during a stunt gone wrong. And in the aftermath, while Michael is dealing with burns, surgeries, and the beginning of what would become a lifelong struggle with pain management, guess who's front and center in every press conference? Joe. Talking about lawsuits, talking about money, talking about everything except how his son is actually doing. We're going to sue Pepsi for everything they've got. Dad, I just want to know I'm going to be okay. That right there tells you everything you need to know about where Joe's priorities sat, even in a genuine medical emergency involving his own child. And here's the thing that makes this whole story even more tragic. Michael never fully closed the door on Joe. Even after everything, even after years of therapy, distance, and public statements about his childhood, Michael still, on some level, kept hoping his father would change. That's what makes generational pain so sticky. It's not that the child doesn't see the dysfunction clearly. It's that some small part of them never stops wanting that parent's approval, no matter how old they get or how famous they become. By the time Michael passed away, the relationship between him and Joe was still, by most accounts, unresolved. Not fully broken, but never fully healed either. Just this permanent hanging tension that outlived even the man's career. And Joe, in later interviews, would talk about regret, about wishing he'd done things differently, about being harder on Michael than he probably needed to be. But regret, after the fact, doesn't rewind the tape. It doesn't give Michael his childhood back. All right, y'all, that's the breakdown for today. Let me know in the comments if you think Joe was just a product of his time doing what he thought was right, or if you think this was straight up trauma dressed up as tough love. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this one. Until next time, peace.